Have you ever wondered how we can help convince our students that it is never too late for our brains to change for the better, to achieve our goals, to do things we couldn't before, to kick away bad habits? Well, it's possible, and we're here to explain the science behind it. Take a look at this graph. Does it surprise you? When a doctor places a newborn baby into a parent's arms, there are high hopes by the parents of all the possibilities the future holds for their child. Interestingly, as the plasticity of the brain decreases, so does the parent's hope for change in their child's brain development, even when research shows that neuroplasticity increases again during adolescence. As teachers, do we have that same decline in hope for our students? Do we take full advantage of those peak years of the plastic and moldable mind of our adolescent students? We hope that our presentation will give you a better understanding of the science behind those critical years. Here's what we hope you'll take away from our presentation on neuroplasticity. First, we'll start with an introduction to neuroplasticity. Then we'll move on to brain basics to understand neuroplasticity, the scientific link between neuroplasticity and growth mindset, activities that enhance neuroplasticity, and finally, we'll end with takeaways for teachers and a conclusion.
Have you ever wondered how and when the study of neuroplasticity began? Adolf Meyer, prompted by the work of William James, who linked plasticity with habit formation, was one of the earliest contributors to the science. Meyer argued against the principle of the mind-body divide that was widely accepted during his time. Since then, the study of neuroplasticity has continued, and modern brain imaging techniques such as MRI or magnetic resonance imaging has made it easier for scientists to observe brain growth and adaptation. One groundbreaking study, the London Black Cab Driver Study, conducted in the early 2000s, provides evidence of the brain's malleability. Drivers of the famous British black cabs study for 3 to 4 years in order to memorize approximately 25,000 streets and 20,000 landmarks, all within a 25-mile radius. Researchers assessed the brain and memory of the driver trainees both before and after the training and found increased gray matter in both the right and left mid-posterior hippocampi. A radical neuroprocedure took place in 2010 that demonstrates the brain's ability to functionally reorganize itself. Cameron Mott, the girl with half a brain, began suffering seizures at the age of 3. Diagnosed with an autoimmune disease that can destroy parts of the brain, Dr. J-Lo led a revolutionary intervention. Dr. J-Lo's team performed a hemispherectomy during which the right hemisphere of Cameron's brain was removed. As anticipated, Cameron was paralyzed on the left side of her body and was expected to remain this way for quite some time. However, within weeks, Cameron recovered function, proof of the brain's capacity to rewire itself. After over a century of research, some groundbreaking studies and interventions, and the discovery of neuroimaging techniques, neuroscientists continue to explore the incredible malleability of the human brain.
Now that we've learned about the brief history on neuroplasticity, let's dive into the question, what is neuroplasticity? How many times have we heard a student say, I can't do this? Well, thanks to neuroplasticity, we can teach our students that their brains can change and that they can do it. What does the term neuroplasticity really mean? Well, the term neuro means nervous system, which consists of the brain, spinal cord, and all the nerves that send and receive information to and from the brain. And plasticity comes from the Greek word plastos, meaning moldable, so together, neuroplasticity means a moldable brain. Neuroplasticity means our brains are pliable and plastic and can grow, adapt, and change. For many years, scientists thought that the brain was fixed and couldn't adapt or change after childhood. But advances in fMRI scanning have shown that this is not true and that our brains can change. We can now see that our brains change and adapt every single day. Every time we learn something new, we are harnessing the power of neuroplasticity. When we learn a new skill or think about something differently, we begin to make new connections between neurons. Every time we practice a new skill, think in a certain way, or feel a specific emotion, those related connections are strengthened, and it becomes easier for our brains to follow this pathway. Take a moment now to imagine you are in a dense forest with no clear pathway, but you need to get to the other side. There is a warm, freshly made apple pie just waiting for you on the other side of the forest. Close your eyes and imagine the pie. Can you see it? Can you smell it? Now imagine what the journey through the forest might be like. It won't be easy, that's for sure. You might have to clear fallen logs, push away branches, form a brand new pathway. The first time through the forest may have been difficult, but the next time you go through the forest, the pathway you made the last time will still be there. Branches or plants might have grown over some of the pathway, but if you keep going back through the path over and over, it will soon become a clear pathway that you can just run across without having to clear anything. The same thing happens in our brains. The first time a signal crosses from one brain cell to another, it requires the greatest effort. The first trip is the most difficult, but transfer becomes easier and easier over time. And as we continue to apply effort to new challenges, our brains establish more stable and reliable pathways until the connection is so strong that information transfer is effortless. And that is the power of neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity is the brain reorganizing itself based on experience and environment, which can change how its circuits are wired. The more neurons that fire together at the same time build stronger connections and shape neural connections that will last into the future. Now that you have an understanding of what neuroplasticity is, let's delve deeper into the fundamental neuroscience to give you a better understanding of what is happening in your students' brains. Neurogenesis is the process of new neurons forming which grow from stem cells. The amount of new neurons forming during adolescence is 4 to 5 times greater than during adulthood. Synaptic pruning is a process that occurs between early childhood and adulthood when unnecessary brain connections are eliminated while important connections are maintained and strengthened. There is an overproduction of neurons during adolescence that will be sorted out as connections get stronger, and some will die off. Experience is fundamental to synaptic pruning. When we were children, we would make connections constantly, and as we age, those connections don't get used any longer because we understand them now. For example, when you play peekaboo with the baby and you remove your hands from your face and you're still right there and the baby laughs, they don't understand that you haven't disappeared. But once that process is uncovered and they realize that you're not really gone, that pathway is no longer needed. It becomes weaker, less traveled, and dies off. The brain grows through increased connectivity between brain regions. This growth in connectivity presents itself as white matter in the brain, which comes from a fatty substance called myelin. As the brain develops, myelin wraps itself around nerve cells' axons, long, thin tendrils that extend from the cell and transmit information, like insulation on an electrical wire. Myelination strengthens and accelerates the communication between brain regions, increases with practice, and underlines a person's basic learning abilities. The myelination process starts from the back of the brain and works its way to the front. It increases during adolescence. That means the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain involved in decision-making, planning, and self-control, is the last to mature. There are two major areas of the brain that are central for the formation of new neurons or neurogenesis, the hippocampus and the cerebellum. The hippocampus is the hub for the formation of new neurons. It involves spatial learning and long-term memory. The cerebellum contributes to the coordination of movement, also involved in intellectual functioning such as executive functioning skills, spatial cognition, and language. These two parts of the brain have the highest granule cell neurons. Granule cells continually produce. They are sensitive to their environment and the learning attached to the cell in order to survive. The prefrontal cortex during adolescence remains in a process of continuous change of growth, pruning, rewiring, and maturation. It is one of the last areas of the brain to develop. The other part of the brain involved in neuroplasticity is the amygdala. It is responsible for thought, emotion, and behavior. Teenagers rely on the amygdala to make decisions as the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed yet. During adolescence, connectivity is changing in the amygdala and rewiring is in process. If we compared the adult brain to the adolescent brain, it would be shown that the adult brain lights up in the prefrontal cortex when using higher thinking skills. Adolescents' prefrontal cortexes are not fully developed yet, and you will find that the amygdala light up instead of areas in the prefrontal cortex. It's not that students don't have frontal lobe capabilities, but rather that their signals are not getting to the back of the brain fast enough to regulate their emotions. It's why risk-taking and impulsive behavior are more common. They don't have the fully developed capacity to think ahead at this time.
Two researchers in particular have taken a special interest in decades of research in neuroplasticity. Firstly, Dr. Carol Dweck developed the concept of growth mindset. Her research focuses on the difference between fixed and growth mindsets and the impact on individual student learning. A simple definition of growth mindset, provided by Dweck, is when students believe that their abilities can be developed. This means that students with a growth mindset have an essential self-belief, a belief that they can grow their brain through consistent effort in the face of challenges. Joe Bowler, another researcher who has worked closely with Dweck, has taken the concept of growth mindset and applied it to mathematics education. Bowler has developed principles of teaching and learning mathematics in which students are presented with challenging mathematical problems and are encouraged to take risks and make mistakes in order to enhance their mathematical understanding. The results of such interventions, as studied by Blackwell and Company, are impressive. So what does neuroplasticity have to do with mindset? Researchers have conducted studies to measure the impact of explicitly teaching neuroplasticity to students, and findings suggest that such interventions have a significant impact on students both in terms of academic motivation and achievement. Panescu and Company, for example, taught 1,594 students about growth mindset using two 45-minute online sessions. The study group, a diverse group of adolescent learners, raised their academic achievement in all core courses. In a larger scale study, Yeager and Company measured the impact of teaching mindset and neuroplasticity to a representative group of adolescent learners from across the United States. The national study of learning mindsets demonstrated that a brief online intervention focusing on the brain's capacity to develop intellectual abilities had a noteworthy impact on student learning and achievement. For example, following the learning mindset intervention, lower achieving students improved their grades, and there was an overall increased enrollment in advanced mathematics courses. So what does neuroplasticity have to do with mindset? The two are beautifully interwoven and together are a powerful force in student learning, motivation, and achievement. Studies demonstrate that fostering a growth mindset is paramount to students' growth and success. So how do we, as educators, help to foster a growth mindset in our learners? Since the seminal work of Dr. Carol Dweck, much has been written on the topic, and a quick Google search will provide an array of information. An excellent starting point, however, would be to review the work of both Carol Dweck and Joe Bowler by visiting their respective websites. We'd also like you to leave here today with some concrete actions that can be applied immediately to help you foster growth mindsets in your students. So we are proposing the following 2 tips offered by Dr. Carol Dweck. The first one is praise the process. In a series of studies conducted by Mueller and Dweck, it was found that praising intelligence or ability had negative consequences on student achievement as compared to praising effort. So instead of saying, "You got the right answer, you are so smart in math," try saying something like this instead. "Yes, that is the right answer. I am really impressed with how hard you worked on that math problem. You didn't give up, and you tried lots of different strategies." You can see how the second example emphasizes the learning process and does not label the innate talent or skill. The second tip also comes from Dweck. It is the power of yet. Imagine for a moment that a student comes to you, discouraged and frustrated, and says, "I didn't get the answer to the question," or "I don't understand this math problem." What if you said just 2 little words in response? Not yet. What effect do you think those 2 little words would have on that student? Not yet. Not yet implies that it's not over yet. That would be failure. Not yet means that there is still hope, that with more practice, more mistake making, and more effective strategies, the student will understand and will get the answer to that question. Making small changes in how we praise and encourage students can have a huge impact on how they embrace challenges, become more comfortable making mistakes, and learn to keep trying. And when they learn to keep trying, students are growing their brains.
Take a moment. Look at the following pictures. Which do you think enhance neuroplasticity? Love, exercise, learning an instrument, stress, sleeping, smoking? For those of you that chose love, you are absolutely correct. Love is one of the most valuable, intentional, emotional experiences humans can produce to drive brain plasticity. It has been proven that a rich social network of friends and family stimulates and enhances healthy brain development. For those of you that chose exercise, you are correct as well. Researchers have found that physical activity enhances structural and functional neuroplasticity. It increases gray matter volume in frontal and hippocampal regions. It increases levels of neurotrophic factors, which are a family of biomolecules that support the growth, survival, and differentiation of both developing and mature neurons. It has been proven, especially in children, to increase academic achievement. Research has shown improvements in cognitive abilities, as in learning and memory, attentional processes, and executive processes. Musical training also results in neuroplastic processes. This might be due to the combination of skills required by music study, such as decoding visual information and transferring it into motor activity, memorizing extended passages of music, learning music structure and rules. But it is believed that there are other several forms of intensive training that can have the same impact, not just music. Other things, such as learning a new language, can also develop brain cognition. For those of you that picked yes for stress, you're right, as well as those that picked no. For those of you that picked yes, stress can cause an emotional arousal to enhance learning and memory via synaptic plasticity of amygdala-dependent pathways. For those of you that chose no, chronic exposure to stress can impair structural and functional development of the adolescent brain, reducing activity in the prefrontal cortex and areas associated with one's attention. It is important to note that during adolescence, the brain is more sensitive to stress than at any time in one's life. The first line of evidence supporting a relationship between sleep and neuroplasticity comes from patients suffering from insomnia. They exhibit reduced gray matter in subregions of the prefrontal cortex and a smaller hippocampus. In addition, patients with primary insomnia show a decrease in memory, which is commonly considered an indicator for neuroplasticity. Nicotine, the neuroactive compound responsible for tobacco addiction, was primarily believed to have beneficial effects on the brain. But researchers have found that nicotine intake has major negative effects on the hippocampus, causing decrease in neurogenesis and increase in cell death. For the adolescent brain, this is particularly true, as it changes the growth and development of the limbic circuitry and in neurotransmitters such as dopamine, serotonin, and acetylcholine, which is important for inhibiting impulses. In relation to smoking, alcohol use and smoking marijuana is very dangerous among adolescents. Research has shown that alcohol consumption inhibits neurogenesis in young people. It suppresses the activity of synapse strengthening receptors in the hippocampus and damages areas of the prefrontal cortex that are necessary for inhibiting impulses and thinking through consequences. Binge drinking also impairs both the white matter and gray matter in the prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, and amygdala. Marijuana use has been linked to structural change in the gray and white matter as well. It causes it to be less efficient in synaptic transmission in the hippocampus. Heavy cannabis users demonstrate a decline in processing speed, memory, flexible thinking, attention, learning, and motivation. I chose these 6 as they are impactful to our classrooms. We can now see the value of providing safe social interactions in a loving and caring environment, while trying to alleviate the chronic stress on our students. We also want to promote a healthy lifestyle through education about sleep deprivation, the negative effects of smoking, drugs, and alcohol. Neuroplasticity research also points to the importance of option classes like physical education, languages, music, the creative arts, and giving students the opportunity to learn something new. There are other activities that can enhance neuroplasticity, such as intermittent fasting, traveling, using mnemonic devices, non-dominant hand exercises, reading fiction, expanding your vocabulary, creating artwork, dancing, and meditation.
Number 1. While early childhood is widely accepted as a major period of brain plasticity, research now shows that adolescence is a second period of increased plasticity, making it a critical period for students and educators. Teaching involves changing the brain, and given that, teachers are orchestrators of neuroplasticity. With great power comes great responsibility. Educators play a key role in ensuring that learning opportunities support the development of adolescents, increasing cognitive capabilities. An understanding of neuroplasticity can inform pedagogical decisions and help teachers create positive brain-friendly experiences for their students that develop deeper learning competencies such as problem-solving, critical thinking, as well as the development of higher-order thinking skills. With less focus on direct instruction, the learner takes initiative, makes decisions, and is actively engaged in posing questions, investigating, experimenting, being curious, solving problems, assuming responsibility, being creative, and constructing meaning for themselves. The bead neuron activity teaches students about the neurons, synapses, and neural connections that are inherent to neuroplasticity and is a great example of experiential learning. Number 2, teaching young people about the complexities of their brains and explicitly teaching students about neuroplasticity can have a transformative impact in the classroom.
Knowing that you have the ability to change your brain can help students realize that they have the power to succeed, encouraging them to seek learning environments that are meaningful to their lives and help them shape their own identity. Having the knowledge that their brains are like Play-Doh and are theirs to build and mold can help motivate students to actively engage in their own learning. Additionally, the development of executive functions are driven by changes in brain structure during adolescence. As the brain becomes more interconnected during this progression into adulthood, young people are increasingly able to engage in adult levels of complex cognition, such as abstract reasoning, future thinking, and social cognition. This, along with improved memory performance, results in an increase in an adolescent's ability to assess their own learning, reflect upon it, and transform it. Number 3. People develop at different rates and ages. While adolescence is often associated with the teenage years, age is not the most accurate way of defining this important developmental stage. Environment and experiences influence the onset of puberty and thus an adolescent's peak in neuroplasticity. Research shows that adolescents raised in homes characterized by less closeness and more conflict mature earlier. Children who've not received proper nutrition because of food scarcity can have a delayed onset. Additionally, some children simply mature more slowly than average, a trait that's often hereditary. Most schools expect students to achieve academic outcomes based on grade levels that are largely age-based. It is important to focus on students' specific developmental needs. Keeping the idea of brain plasticity at the forefront of your professional practice offers a constant reminder that when students struggle with lessons, it isn't because they can't learn, but because they need more practice, instructional support, or scaffolding. Number 4. Increased neuroplasticity can create vulnerability. Adolescents face an increased risk for certain issues related to mental health, behavioral health, alcohol and substance use, accidents, trauma, sexual health, and nutrition due to the physical, cognitive, and emotional changes they experience. These changes can create negative spirals. Risks for health issues like addiction are higher during adolescence. Education can help students explore healthy versions of risk and understand the neuroplasticity behind addiction so they can make more informed choices. Schools can provide additional resources and services to develop students' social and emotional skills. Health and physical education classes can be utilized to improve students' knowledge about the body changes they experience and how to care for themselves. The adolescent brain needs support to create positive spirals. Number 5. The plasticity of the brain means that it's never too late to get people involved in learning. Many people think that IQ is fixed. You're born smart, dumb, or average, and your capacity for learning is determined by what you're born with. However, many recent studies have suggested that mental abilities like IQ are not set in stone. A 2011 study discovered that IQ changed over time, improving for some people and deteriorating for others. Educational interventions were thought to positively influence IQ. People's attitude is to decide early on that this is a clever kid and this is not a clever kid, but this research suggests you can't make that assessment. Additionally, while our neuroplasticity may not be as efficient as we get older, there is always an opportunity to learn and shape our neural pathways. How can you use what you learned about neuroplasticity to empower and engage your students?
Remember seeing this graph? Instead of hoping for change, we can now know the science behind the change. Neuroplasticity is proof that the students we teach can always learn, unlearn, and relearn.